The enemy will find, when they take over, only ruined earth and charred remains. Thousands of battle casualties and frostbite victims are evacuated from the emergency fields at Hagaru and Koto and flown here to the Yanpo airfield near Hungnam, where they are transferred to hospital planes for the trip to Japan. They will soon find themselves warm and well cared for. Many of these men suffered their wounds during the withdrawal from the Changjin Reservoir, but none were left behind to the communists. Those still fighting along the snow-covered passes of the North Korean mountains face a tough battle before they can reach the comparative safety of Hungnam. With only short pauses at Hagaru near the Changjin Reservoir and Koto 10 miles south, the steady push to safety continues. Chinese prisoners captured by patrols are carried along on the withdrawal for whatever information they may furnish G2. In contrast to the North Korean prisoners, these Chinese are much better equipped and more warmly clad. The Marines have a bitter march ahead. It's 44 miles to Hungnam. The road winds through some of the roughest fighting terrain in the world. In the history of the U.S. Marine Corps, this march will stand as one of its most valiant battles. Twisting, icy roads, snowstorms, below zero cold. General Winter is allied with the Chinese in this operation. While the convoys are moving east, rear guard units are still fighting to hold back the Chinese hordes near Hagaru. Many vehicles break down and are abandoned. The engineers work constantly to make the road passable. Bridges dropped by air are built ahead of the column. These desperately tired men inch their way along until they reach the little settlement of Koto. They join 3,000 more Marines. But there is little rest here. The Chinese wave is still sweeping down from the north, and a few hours' rest may mean annihilation. The flagrant aggression of Chinese communist troops in Korea arouses the country's ire. With the North Korean bandits well under control and with the promise that UN troops would be withdrawn, the unexpected entry of 300,000 Red Chinese across the Manchurian border may well precipitate World War III. President Truman voices his accusation of Red imperialism.
The forces of the United Nations are in Korea to put down an aggression that threatens not only the whole fabric of the United Nations, but all human hopes of peace and justice. If the United Nations yields to the forces of aggression, no nation will be safe or secure. If aggression is successful in Korea, we can expect it to spread throughout Asia and Europe and to this hemisphere. We are fighting in Korea for our own national security and survival. We have committed ourselves to the cause of a just and peaceful world order through the United Nations. We stand by that commitment.
On the battlefront in Korea, United Nations forces fight desperately to meet the Red attack. Here our troops must face what General MacArthur has termed a new war. Outnumbered more than 2 to 1 by Chinese and North Koreans, the UN forces hope to regroup and to meet the overwhelming attack which has broken their fluid lines of defense across northern Korea. The president has stated that the use of the atomic bomb is being considered to halt the communist onrush inspired by Russia. His hope is that the employment of this devastating weapon will be unnecessary, but the final hope lies with the United Nations. At a momentous meeting at Lake Success, the Red Chinese delegation from Peking hear themselves charged with every crime on the calendar of aggression by Ben C. Lim, representative of the Republic of Korea. While Mr. Lim talks, the delegation, whose hordes are threatening world peace, refuse to take their seats and face their accuser.
I point my finger at these representative of the Chinese Communist regime, and I ask, why do they come here with unclean hands? I ask again, why does this group come here with hands that drip with blood, the blood of the United Nations troops, the blood of the Korean people?
Blocking a United Nations motion to order communist Chinese armies to leave Korea, the Russians used 3 vetoes. On each of the votes, Russia's Jacob Malik was the only dissenting voice. The United States, represented by Chief Delegate Warren Austin, took up the debate and further accused the Chinese Reds of aggression in Korea.
It is no exaggeration to say that that problem is the gravest one now confronting the world. That problem is this: will there be peace or war in the Far East? The world awaits anxiously the answer to this question.
United Nations troops are obliged to fall back on all fronts in the face of attacks by Chinese Reds, estimated to number 500,000. Tanks cover the retreat and shelter soldiers pinned down by enemy fire. Already casualties among American members of the UN forces have risen to beyond the 30,000 mark. Bitter winter weather, as well as an enemy which outnumbers them more than 3 to 1, have taken their toll. Most of the wounded are evacuated by air to Japanese hospitals as quickly as possible. Meantime, the retreat continues steadily as the Red hordes pour across the Manchurian border, and another estimated 500,000 remain poised on the frontier. Department of Defense and newsreel pictures show graphically the suffering undergone by 1st Cavalry soldiers taken prisoner by the North Koreans and later released by the Chinese Reds. These are Americans who have dedicated themselves to the United Nations fight for freedom. Blazing Pyongyang, the former North Korean capital, is left behind as United Nations forces start their retreat before 1 million Chinese Reds driving toward the 38th parallel and Seoul. This is the bitter fate of the Allied armies, who almost had the independence of Korea a settled question. Hard-won positions are abandoned as troops recross icy rivers on their way to a new line just above Seoul. While the retreat proceeds in orderly fashion, the United Nations seek to arrange a ceasefire order and to clear the entire Korean problem and bring about world peace. In Northeast Korea, the situation is even graver. Here, thousands of Marines and other United Nations forces are trapped by overwhelming masses of Chinese Reds who encircle them near the Changjin Reservoir. These are some of the hard-fighting Marines cut off by the communists and whose lives for many anxious days were left in the balance. In the sub-zero weather, they make camp, awaiting assurance of evacuation, knowing they will not be abandoned to a relentless foe. Rations and water are scarce, but these hard-bitten troops facing a Korean Dunkirk never lose faith in their own ability and that of their air and sea comrades to keep fighting when the situation is blackest. From the Changjin Reservoir to Hagaru, to Koto, to Hamhung, and the escape port of Hongnam is a long, terrible route, especially in the teeth of a stinging Siberian gale. This is the pack-up for the beginning of evacuation and the hope of survival. Snow-covered sleeping bags are the only protection for this group, which walked for 18 solid hours and had no sleep for 3 nights. All along the route, they were harassed by communist fire from front and rear. Now they're getting set for a breakthrough during a Korean Valley Forge.